here. We're going to call the policy committee meeting to order. Start with introductions. Terry, do you want to?
Yes. Hello, Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Code Casey, Senior Director for High School Academics, and Chris Wright is our Director for CPA and IB. Sure.
Mary Kane, Senior Legal Counsel.
Liz Large, Contracted Senior Legal Advisor.
Julie Remeckowitz, Board Member of the Policy Committee.
Patty Sullivan, Board Member.
Michelle DePass, Board Member.
Dan Powell, Board Manager.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Here's Chris.
Hello. Do you have anybody online?
No.
Okay. Terry, do we have anybody signed up for public comment? No. Great. Perhaps as a courtesy to our two guests, although we'd love for you to stay for the whole meeting, are you here for the AP?
We are.
Should we do that first? So
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
That's
Go
not
home
is,
to
is that okay with the rest of the committee?
Yes.
I got a meeting across the hall with the CTE Student Council, so I'm trying to.
Okay.
Okay, well then this will be
I'm here.
perfect. So just to set things up, Director Sullivan had raised an issue, a student had raised an issue with Director Sullivan and the rest of the board about access to AP classes, and there were some good discussions about that, and instead of moving a policy, here to hear more about what those discussions led to, and so I'm going to pass it to Director Sullivan to whatever frame up you want to provide.
Okay, yes, this one student had come to the board meeting, and then he contacted probably the whole board, but I responded to him on email. And he was just really persistent. The reason was he was a freshman, and on our website, it said freshmen could take 8 classes unless the class was full. But he was not allowed to take 8 classes. So he wanted to be sure that the policy was changed, maybe not changed the way he wants it, but that it would be transparent and people would know what to do about AP classes at all the high schools. Or at least that it would be stated as to how they would be admitted or not to an AP class. So I took that to the superintendent, and then she called Billy and Christine, I think, to a meeting with James and his father, and we discussed looking into it and coming up with a policy, also talking about leaving out a policy for the administrative director. Right. So that's where it sits, and you have been working on it.
Thank you, Director Sullivan and Director Edwards. Thank you for the opportunity. You may recall that in the fall, shortly after the student made the initial complaint, we provided a board memo suggesting that we should conduct a comprehensive review of our AP programming in the school district. And so we're happy to be here today to share a little bit of our findings and some next steps. Pleased to introduce Chris Brighter, Director of CT, AP, and IB, who is talking.
Thanks. So I think everyone has a memo. Generally, that sort of outlines the work that we started and we'll sort of continue to do over the course of this year, and then I'll sort of frame what's coming. So the first page of the memo sort of paints a picture of what the AP, sort of like the overview of AP in our district. So it looks at how many AP subjects we offer by school. It looks at last year's AP participation and performance. So an increase in the total number of students taking AP, an increase in the total number of exams, relatively high exam score, average across the district, 3.2. 3 is an important threshold in AP that usually is often what gets students access to college credit. And then increase of about 17% of students earning 3 or higher from the previous year. Similarly, at the bottom of that first page, you can see AP participation by grade level. So the number of 9th grade students who tested 10th grade students who tested, so on and so forth. You can see the number of students, the number of total exams that group of students took, the average scores on those exams, and then the percentage of students who scored 3+. If you turn to the second page, begin to break down participation and performance by racial group. So you can see the number of students that participated in AP exams by demographic, the number of exams that students took. So, most students take multiple AP exams, and the average is there, so you can see that. And then how many of those students scored 3+. And so you can see that there is a sort of obvious racial disparity that still exists when looking at that. Similarly, if you look at just historically underserved versus not historically underserved students, how many students enrolled in exams, and how many students took those exams. And so that second table there shows that there are, let's say, 4,031 non-historically underserved students enrolled in an AP class, and then how that translates to how many of them took the actual exam. And so there's a bigger gap for the number of historically underserved students enrolled and the number of students who took an exam. So while overall the sort of picture in the district is strong, there is of course disparity across both participation and success rates. That is sort of persistent and pervasive across racial groups. So what that sort of led to is then beginning to do a review of all of the AP courses to determine where there is alignment across the system and where there is misalignment across the system. And so on that third page, you can sort of see the beginning of the findings of that. And so I categorized each subject into three sort of types. Either high alignment, meaning that most of the district operates the exact same way. Students can access the courses at the same grade level. It's offered for the same type of credit, core versus elective, and the prerequisites are generally the same. So an example of that, AP English, Literature, and Composition, shows that for the most part, it's 11th and 12th grade across the whole system. It's offered as core credit for students at all 6 of the high schools, and the prerequisites are pretty similar. English 5, 6. If you look at the second one, that's an example where the alignment is, I would say, moderate. So in this case, AP Calculus AP, the grade level varies, and whether it's offered as core versus elective also varies, but for the most part, the prerequisites remain the same. So that's sort of how I categorize that as moderate. And then on the next page is an example of a place where alignment is pretty far off. So this is AP Physics, which you can see is offered at a wide range of grade levels, offered for various types of credits across the whole system, and the prerequisite list is very different for each of the high schools. Some say Algebra 1-2, some say Algebra 3-4, some say co-enrollment in Algebra 3-4. So this is an example where there's sort of relatively low alignment. And so our sort of next step is to begin, we started at sort of central office level with engaging some stakeholders, which are senior directors of content and then also senior directors of schools, to begin looking at both access, alignment, and student success for our AP programs. And so what we've essentially developed is a set of guiding questions to move this work forward. And there's sort of 5 high-level questions, which are: what does equitable access to AP look like in our district? How should AP courses be aligned across schools? What barriers currently exist that limit student participation in AP? What systems and supports do we need to improve AP success? And then what is our district's vision for AP within the broader advanced coursework plans? And then sort of overlaid on top of that is a stakeholder engagement plan about who to engage in each of those questions. So the sort of approach that I'm taking to this is basically a mixed methods research study. So the qualitative part of it is this sort of rich interview sort of focus group piece that will sort of help paint the picture, and then overlay that on the quantitative aspect of it, which is what the data actually says. So that's sort of the plan moving forward for how to begin to look at how to better align our system to ensure that students both have access to and succeed in advanced coursework. I know the initial question is about 9th grade, but really it's sort of like prompted the needing to look at the whole system.
Do you mind touching base on the stated outcomes?
Yeah.
Just to get really concrete about what will come out of this work.
So as we sort of discussed, some of the potential outcomes could be an administrative directive, like we talked about. It will lead to hopefully updating the district course guides so it's more uniform across the system, so that the prerequisites are consistent, or whether a course is offered as core credit or elective credit is consistent. And then the development of the family outreach and communication plan, which will sort of help ensure that families are well informed about AP opportunities, what the expectations are, and then how to sort of strengthen the potential supports that we put around AP to make sure that students have access to things that will help them. That's not an exhaustive list, but at least a sort of beginning list. I think I will take any questions. I will vote.
Yeah, when do you think this will be finished? When do you think?
The goal is to finish this by the end of this academic year.
Okay.
Fortunately, I'm in this sort of like research mode as part of my doctorate work, so this just feels like a side project of what I'm already. Yeah, the goal is to sort of engage all of these stakeholder groups by the end of this year.
Critical moment, of course, is when students begin looking at course offerings in their school course guides. That typically happens in November, December, January. And we want to make sure that the changes are finalized this school year so that school leaders and teachers have a chance to process in early fall, the adjustments can be made in course guides, forecasting sheets, so that, as Chris mentioned, really we're looking for increased transparency, increased access and alignment, and then more equitable outcomes.
Great, and I think to make sure, I'm sure it's part of it, make sure that students and parents know where to look.
Yes,
Because I think when I tried to find stuff, it was very hard.
that's right.
And you can, hopefully, some of the concerns raised by the student and the family, you can see echoes of those being addressed in the
Yes, there.
family communication, alignment, clarifying what's core, what's elective, what's offered at what grade level, consistency across buildings and programs. So all of that will be captured in this work. And we're also centering another large issue that we're trying to address, which is inequitable outcomes. That we need to make sure that these are spaces and programs where historically underserved students are also experiencing success, because we know that college level coursework at high school level, or successful completion of college level coursework at high school level is a strong predictor of post-secondary success. So that will take more than just updating the course guide. It will take some alignment in terms of professional development and other forms of support.
I'm really excited to hear more about this. It's a world that I don't know, and I was really surprised to see the schools that are on the list that have advanced placement. I also love mixed methods research. I just think it's so, I mean, you get the qualitative and the quantitative together, the storytelling and the data to back it up, and it's fabulous. I also just returned this week from a training I took over the weekend at Howard University, sponsored by the National School Boards Association. And AP placement was on it was a policy development course. So it was the part one of a 3-part series of courses that is looking at student outcomes first, and AP classes and where they are, their locations, that we've already seen in the tables that you showed the racial disparity. And the policy piece is that as a board, we have we have a role to play in the policy about where this shows up and who gets tested, and who gets access. So, but we don't have to do that right now because it's already kind of work that's on the table. But I also want to share that I think all of the participants, all of the instructors, one of the instructors who's the executive director of National School Board Association said she's from a district, not a school district, and a community that's just about 100% African American and high income. And their board is 100% Black, and they still have poor outcomes. So she was like, don't feel bad, everybody's on a journey. But she did mention, they did mention that this was one, advanced placement, tag, special education are places where the board actually has a say and a role in, helping create those outcomes. So I don't have any questions about this, but except for the main, is the goal, you have multiple goals, is one of the goals to right size, to identify kids or provide access? Did I hear you say to provide access for historically underserved? Because that's the group I like to focus on, just that's my own personal thing. And we're not in a policy decision, they're not calling them marginalized or underserved, they're like bottom third. Because it's not just race-based, it can also like correlate with poverty or whatever.
I think putting on my research hat, I don't wanna
Yeah,
jump to
please.
saying what the potential outcomes could be without having all the information. But
Okay, yeah,
the sort of goal or focus or intention is about how are we ensuring that we have equitable access to these programs, they're available, and then how do we ensure that once we have that access, it's just
right. And
broadly
so
speaking, that's the umbrella.
are you looking then at the ecosystem? So there's something systemic you might need to change. So you're gathering the data first and then kind of
That's right. Yeah,
doing
without really.
a market characterization of the landscape.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that the way that sort of AP has been governed so far is all lived at the school level. Schools decide which AP courses that are offered, schools decide how those sort of show up in the course guide, et cetera. So we are really starting to examine what our role is in the Office of Teaching and Learning, specifically in AP, which is sort of under my umbrella, in like thinking about this.
Excellent.
I really appreciate you bringing the issue of policy and what is the right level. Is it a school policy level or is it district policy? And we do have some, speaking of the ecosystem, we do have places in our ecosystem that are really leading the charge. Every sophomore at one of our high schools takes an AP course as part of their social studies coursework.
Yes.
It
That's
is
great.
part of the core. It is not something that students have to choose as an elective. It is integrated as core social studies course. We also have another high school where every sophomore takes a AP English class, right? And so we'll be looking to some examples within our ecosystem for how schools have created a system where these are not exclusive spaces, these are spaces that all students are prepared for, and what are the supports they put in place to make sure that students are successful. So there's some, and as Director Breida shared earlier, the numbers are positive. We have more students taking AP exams than, last year more than the year before. We're offering more AP courses. I mean, it's really exciting to see our students' enthusiasm and commitment. And so we want to harness that energy and think about what additional opportunities are there to increase access and, as I mentioned, more equitable outcomes.
How are the teachers teaching the AP courses to everyone, Sealand, in those schools?
And I'm gonna, if you could, because that seems like it's opening a big topic, so maybe have a short answer,
Sure.
because I have a couple of questions and then we're going to the next topic, but go ahead and.
Yeah, and maybe we can just commit to reporting back on that and providing some more information.
Yeah, as the research council.
Oh, that'd be great, yeah.
Great.
So a couple things I had is, I think an administrative directive is a good place for a lot of the details. There might be room, space for policy that would have the overarching principles about equitable access and those kinds of things. So I think we should think about like not directing that ninth graders in the policy would be able to have access, but
No.
more like here's what the overarching principles might be about our coursework. So just something.
It would be establishing a
It
vision.
might exist.
Or it might be under the student achievement. So I think it could be like we add something to that and then the administrative directive does that. So just something to think about what the board's role of like setting the guardrails, the parameters or the aspirational.
The vision.
And then just a couple things. So in 2012, I think when Shay James was the high school director here, there was an initiative with a lot of high school parents called D+CC, which was Diploma plus College and Career, which is when the career coordinators came in and the career course came into the high schools. But but it also was looking at across the board equity in college prep classes, so rather than AP. And I'm wondering about, and I'm looking for an answer, but like, it seems that if this is a district initiative, that we should have IB and dual credit included as well, because obviously not all of the high schools, it seems like we should include the other high schools, and they're a little bit different. I mean, the questions will be different because IB you can't take as a freshman anyway, and but I think the same sort of questions, because I also think there's some learning in IB, and that I know Cleveland, at least in 2017 and 18, was doing IB for all, like every student took IB English.
So
So it wasn't like they took junior English, they took IB English. And so like that's a way to like not force participation, but like everybody participates.
Yeah.
choice architecture, that's still happening, both Cleveland and
Great, and they also had IB Math.
yeah, IB biology, I think is like an IB for all class at Cleveland, and then IB history is IB for all class.
Like Anisha was the school, I think she was leading that. So I think that'd be worthwhile to look at those, and then the models of how you get greater participation, because if it's not just, hey, you're scheduled into that, versus you have to opt into it,
Yeah.
you get different participation rates,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
I think you bring up a good point too about that. I mean, they are different fundamentally, right? So like, your point, ninth grade students can't take IB, 10th grade students can take first year, 2-year IB class. They can't begin testing until 11th grade, so that is, there's.
And all students can take theory of knowledge, I mean, so
Right.
it seems like, and I know if we just did AP, IB, people would be like, oh, Jefferson's not on here. So
Yeah.
I just think,
All the high school sites.
Okay.
Right? So yes,
and then, the last thing I guess I would say is, on the AP subjects offered by schools, the one thing that I was curious about is just like what the participation was by school. So in the 2010s, Franklin had, I don't know, it still exists, Advanced Scholars, which is, you had hundreds of students and very diverse students committing to take 3 AP courses. And they were then advanced scholars and they got a cord. And you just saw like, it used to be IW Wells was the big AP powerhouse in the early 2000s, and then Franklin overtook it because of the getting so many more kids to participate in it. So it would be, I think, looking at different ways that increase participation in addition to the course catalog. I'd love to see that as part of it, because it answers some, I think we do have some places already in the district where by school you'll see differentiated levels of participation and disaggregated. So I don't know, just my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. The like prerequisites, the advising structures, the school culture, like how that all sort of contributes to AP sort of participation, building schools. Yeah.
The parent, you mentioned doing some type of like community engagement, and parent engagement would be
Yep.
maybe even earlier than 9th grade.
Sure.
I don't know how early this starts, but to get families at least knowing. Awesome.
So did you take away from that some next steps that some?
Yeah, I think there are certainly some questions that we can bring back. I know that one of the things that I'm happy to get refined or send is the number of students participating in sources, but also I'm happy to share sort of the guiding question document that I have for engagement that's coming to that before it sort of to know the direction.
And I guess I would say to Director Sullivan, since you brought this issue, thank you for raising it. If you, based on like looking at the student achievement policy or some of the policy discussions with PACS, and she just came out of a great learning experience, if there is, like, we want to have a framework at the policy level, again, it's not down into the details, but more sets out some frameworks, let me know, we can put it on the committee agenda.
Yeah, I'm not the academic expert by any means, and so it would be, for me, and the board's role is clearly like setting out a vision, for the superintendent to, and designates to implement, so. I'm excited about this. I think it's really great. Appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing it forward and thanks for coming to the meeting.
Absolutely, of course.
I can't
Thank
wait
you
to
so
see
much.
your research.
Yeah. Mixed methods.
Thanks, man. And then thank you.
Sounds like some.
Sounds like
martial
WWF.
arts.
I know. It is.
Mixed martial arts.
Mixed methods action.
Action research. That gets into that last statistics class you need to get before you get your PhD, doesn't it?
That's right. Goal is that based on mixed methods, there should be some action.
Oh, I love that.
That's where we're moving.
Mixed
Right?
methods.
Thank you all
That is
so
kind
much.
of MMA.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
All right, so as you all might recall, because we had a bond meeting that was unscheduled, we had a policy committee meeting that we skipped. So we had some things on the agenda that we were
Yes.
going to, that we considered kind of set up for action, but hadn't moved. So we have the next two are two of those items. And so I'm gonna ask Liz to provide just a brief overview of the reasons why we're changing the policy around the Board of Education and filling vacancies. It's relatively straightforward.
Okay.
And you have in your packet, there is essentially just a striking out of one sentence. And do you want to share
Yeah, the why.
the why?
Oh, yeah,
It should
that'd
be
be
a very
great.
quick agenda item. It doesn't comply with state law.
Okay.
So I don't know where it came from and how long ago, but as we were looking at that process when Director Scott left, we realized that it was no compliance. So striking it would make the policy consistent with state law.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we took out the,
And if there's no
you
eligible
can't
zone resident.
appoint somebody.
Right, you can't go outside the zone.
Okay,
Okay.
It's just, I mean, we could appoint somebody if nobody's up, but you couldn't appoint somebody from outside.
from
Okay.
oh, not from the district.
It could,
Okay,
it's
got
not
it.
just anybody. They have to live within the zone and take it.
Right. Okay, let's see how fast these.
Okay.
Let's make that a goal for everyone.
Pardon?
Let's make that a goal for everyone.
Find it.
Well,
Okay, well,
27.
we'll see how cooperative everyone is. Okay, so, I'd like to know this committee, can we refer this with a recommendation to the full board for consideration
Yes.
for a first reading?
I think so, yes.
Okay,
Hopefully straightforward.
so the next agenda item is, again, this was something that we had worked on at the previous meeting. It's a small amendment to the ethics and conflict of interest policy. And we had a discussion, the wording was more expansive. It is that the change is in section,
All the way around it again. Section 8.
okay, sorry, somehow I printed out two copies of this. So in section 8, the last time we discussed it, this is like restriction on board member employment by the district. So since board members supervise superintendent, and manage their contract. The earlier proposal had been that there be like a cooling off period of time between the time a board member served on the board and was overseeing the superintendent and the time that they would could apply for or accept an offer of employment. And based on the discussion last time, that I think was a good discussion, remove the waiting period. It's just, if you're currently on the board, you can't be, so the new language not be that, once you're off the board, you can do whatever you want.
Hopefully.
Well, you.
Within reason.
Yeah, and it also, once you're off the board, you're no longer in a supervisory role of the superintendent. So the amended language would just be that current members may not apply for accepting the offer. So current board members.
So the year cooling off period was removed. I'm just wondering if by removing that, it's just like, it almost sounds like current board members may not apply or accept any offer of employment. Oh, it's current board members, so. I actually still, I think, from our last discussion, I still think that the district needs to hire based on the needs of the district. And this is like not, I just got done with a Policy Institute training. And what board members do when they get off the board is not our, it's not our purview.
Right, and that's,
And
and so this would not say that, so this is current board members may not apply for a position, because you're still actually in the position of supervising the superintendent.
And basically what we wanna stop is somebody that is currently overseeing the work of the superintendent from coming in and then being in a subordinate position.
No. Once you're off the board,
You're just a citizen.
right, and you can do whatever you want, but it wouldn't be that, when you're in the position of supervising somebody, also then applying for a job in which they have ultimately the CEO of the organization. Well, you're a current board member.
Yes. I still think it's quite outside. In fact, what I heard this weekend is that we should be focused on intently on student achievement, intently on the budget, and intently on the superintendent evaluation, and not much else. So this, to me, even just having it in here seems like a board policy overreach. That's just my personal opinion about it. It feels like,
It's to set ethical guidelines.
Wh-
And which is what the whole policy is about.
right, the whole, and I appreciate that it was, I think it was moved right to this policy. It was on its own before? Or has it always been under
all of
ethics?
No.
Okay.
So is it, so nothing like that is stated earlier?
No.
About being on the board?
Is this consistent with what other like other relationships? It's definitely not at the city, because people that are, Emma County, as a matter of fact, also has hired former electeds.
But that would still be allowed. So,
If a board member were to be offered an offer of employment, which I think would be awkward while they're serving, this would just require them to.
it would require them to be off the board before they're exploring an employment relationship with the district. I mean, it's using your office for employment. So if you're off, you can apply for whatever job you want to.
Yes. I guess I would think I would hold a board member to be, not to start seeking employment opportunities before their service ended, but
Well, just like everything, any other ethics rules or conflict of interest rules, it's stating the expectations.
yeah, I still feel like, I'm conflicted about this one, because I believe that when the district has an opening like we have for CFO, just recently filled, I feel like if there was someone on the board that were applying for a position, that they would quit.
Well, then they
would have
then they wouldn't be
They would
current
be a
board member.
non-current board member.
right.
In other words, are you trying to get at board members serving and applying for jobs at the same time?
Yes.
Has that
Because
come up before?
Because I shared with you an example. of
Yes.
when- and
13 years ago, it was
setting
in the past.
setting ethical rules like after something happens is I'd say it's better practice to do it proactively.
Yes, it makes sense.
It just creates a fine line. So for example, as board members, we vote on the budgets of all the departments. The whole organization, we vote on the superintendent's contract, we provide evaluation, we have a lot of power in terms of governance. So then if we're in the position of applying for a job, somebody over which we have authority, whether it's budget authority or contracts.
In that case, though, wouldn't the person that's currently serving and approving their own potential salary, I mean, there would be a conflict there.
Well, that,
Is that,
this is a reason why current board members shouldn't be applying for jobs while they're current board members, again. They're not,
because we oversee the salary schedule.
this salary schedule, we oversee like the entire district budget, we manage and evaluate the superintendent, so it's all who is ultimately the person who has the ultimate hiring authority.
It seems to me that it already says that under 5 conflicts of interest A, the board members are prohibited from being compensated by the district as an employee or contractor. So it already says you can't be an employee.
This is a little bit different, it's close, but this would be like actually after you got the job. So it's just that you can't be creating a position in which using, and I'm gonna use a term that's not, but I'm not using it in the legal sense, I'm gonna just say that, I'm not sitting here. But like undue influence that you are applying for a job when you're actually at the top.
So that
of the
just was
org chart.
applying. as
This
well
would,
as
this would
you can't
be, this would be saying you can't work at the district at the same time as your board member. And, I mean, maybe even maybe this language actually just fits under there.
No board member or
Under
employee shall
input,
benefit
Maybe
under any.
underneath 5A. Which is fit.
Well, this says no board member or employee may benefit under any district contract for which they participated in the authorization for 2 years following board service. So that actually says if you voted on a salary schedule in which, let's just say the CFO position, if you
Was
voted
it a
on it in
contract?
2025,
I think this is limited to contracts, so a salary schedule is,
I mean, you could add it, or salary schedule. That would be,
benefit
that
of
would
the
be
sal-
more restrictive though, just,
the benefit of a newly enacted updated salary schedule is probably the incremental difference between.
okay,
I'm not sure I want to complicate that concept of salary schedule.
okay. I was just
I thought
talking
about
about
that, I'm
because we
thinking
have
on
the
the fly.
authority to, we are to approve that, right? Salary schedule?
Yeah. Board approves the salary schedule.
would you rather have it in this section? These could just be dropped in this section as a, it could actually be the second sentence.
I just, if it's already in there, I don't want to.
But it's not already, it's not already in there.
It's not already in.
I haven't thought about this, but this defines an actual conflict of interest. So.
In 5A,
in 5A, so applying for a job while you are a board member, I don't know if that is an actual conflict of interest or not.
perceived,
Perceived, yes. So there's actual potential in the statute. But this says all board members and district employees must disqualify themselves from participating in district actions in which they have an actual conflict of interest. This means, among other things, the list.
Mhm.
So adding to the list of actual conflicts, a thing that may or may not be an actual conflict. Because merely applying, I mean, I'm thinking on the fly here as I'm trying to put that word, this proposal, to put it in, to move it from A to here may not be, there may be circumstances where you don't want that to happen, that's a policy choice, but it isn't per se an actual conflict of interest.
I see.
No, okay.
So it's a matter of,
I could think about it tonight, for a different moment and come back, but on the fly, I'm not sure.
Yeah, because that's participating in district action. Not a district action for you to apply.
To apply, right.
so
you
if
okay
I
with-
were gonna quit today, then tomorrow I could do whatever I want,
Yes.
which sounds amazing.
Are you talking about 531?
Let's not go back to the board vacancy policy, we already finished that one.
Yeah, we just finished that, no, it just sounds, wow. Current board members may not apply for or accept That's restricting the board member, but it's not restricting the district.
Well, it basically means that it's saying they shouldn't be offered, so it's like, hey, I need you to approve this contract I've got, or, get on board with our budgets, or the budget cuts we're not taking, and I've got a space for you in my organization.
Yeah.
Should we send it out for a first reading? Or recommend to the board for a first reading?
I'm just not sure where I land on this. I think that, I feel like I feel like it's overreach. So.
Are you up for having a first reading?
I am. I'm just wondering if it can be worded a little differently, but yeah, I don't know. But I see why it's there. And I'm glad it doesn't extend, many days past when you're on.
So we'll send it out for a first reading, and we can have more discussions, and I think at the board meeting, we're at the first reading, if you don't have to, but if you want to share now, or you can obviously share later up to, so feel free to do that, because I don't want to represent, like, this came just out of committee, but nobody have any questions.
Okay, perfect.
And I will.
I'll wait till we have a larger discussion with the whole board.
Okay. So, we have two other policies, and I wanna, neither one of them are we acting on today, or making a recommendation, so, people don't have to feel pressured, like, you don't have to raise all the issues you have, because there'll be more time because both of them are relatively new topics. And I am gonna move up topics, since Emily, you're here. Yeah, comes at the table. So I'm gonna introduce the topic. And to me, this is a old topic in some ways for me, because in the early 2000s, most of our focus option programs had requirements that students, to get into them, to get on, to apply for them. First of all, they had school-based lotteries, which who knows what was happening, in the back room. But they had school-based lotteries, and also sometimes there were requirements of, like, the parents had to commit to volunteering a certain number of hours. They had to they had to go pick up the application, because it was different from each program at the individual school. Sometimes they had to have references from their preschool teacher, like where they were ready for a focus program. And in the early.
For a 4-year-old?
Like for immersion programs, so in the early 2004 or 5, we eliminated all those, and we went to this is Ruby Golf, we went to one application that was consistent with no criteria, that you didn't have to fill anything out. So then in 2023, so 2 years ago, yeah.
So, 2022.
Again.
Yeah.
We had an issue that this same policy for kindergarten admission and early admission came up. And TAG, which is the TAG Advisory Committee, this has been something that they had advocated for, and that there be an ability to, like, test in early kindergarten. Correct me if I'm, but you could have a private test that you could apply for to get in kindergarten if your birthday was past the September 1st.
September 1st, okay.
And so 2 years ago, it was one of those ones that was not universally loved, but we eliminated the ability to have a waiting period. Or this period of time in which if you were past the September 1st date that you could submit letters of reference and also private tests, like my child's ready.
So you as a parent, you would pay for a private test?
You want me to-
Or,
Go ahead.
because I vaguely
so this
remember
is-
this talking about
Yeah,
the
this
age
kid
of.
used to live under TAG, so, and it was called early entry to kindergarten. And it was a process that was in place for many years, and I shared, I think, do they all have the staff memo?
Yeah, we.
Okay, so if you want the background on it, it is summarized in a staff memo that we brought to this committee, in 2022. And so, you know, it originally lived under TAG. It was specifically for families whose rising 5-year-old was not 5 by September 1, but soon after. And families could go through this process of getting private testing and collecting documents and sort of applying for like a waiver or an exception to the district to do early entry to kindergarten. And so meaning they would start at the 4-year-old. It never meant the child was TAG qualified, so that was always like, because it was overseen by TAG just because there sort of wasn't another place for it to live. But there was a lot of confusion about that over the years, and so once there was an early learners department that became the space that handled all of our kindergarten transition work, we moved it over to early learners. So that it was more appropriately just like a pathway to kindergarten and support for kindergarten. And what we learned in doing that was that there were, it was very labor intensive for a very small number of families and children on the staff side. B, there were some really big equity concerns with it.
This was the second topic of this policy committee, this policy training.
Ah.
This TAG.
Yeah, well, that's what this is, we
And
separated
early-
this totally from TAG, this is
Right,
not a
it's-
TAG
no, but
conversation.
it lived
TAG,
under
I
TAG.
have feelings about it, but it's not a TAG conversation.
Yeah.
But it was
not
more
just
just-
TAG, but the early
The
entry
early-
piece.
And
Because
interesting.
it preferences families that can afford to gather the paperwork and
Yes.
organize it home and
Yes, and pay for the testing,
Pay for the
and there was a
testing.
lot of, potential bias in tests and like what test really does test if a student is ready for kindergarten at that age, and all those questions, right? And so we dug through a bunch of data, we analyzed all the data, which is all in the staff memo. And we came to this body, and we also looked at comparative, what's happening in other districts around us, what is the state rule around this, and came and said we'd like to take this out of policy, we'd like to basically have a hard rule that you need to be 5 by September 1 to start kindergarten, and that's what we've done for the last 2 years. And now you'd like to
Okay.
put something else in the policy, right? Is that?
Yeah, so I was policy committee chair when that happened, and heard from the parents who didn't like that when we took that out, and I very strongly, just like the same reasons why we weren't gonna have applications for focus option programs, and we weren't gonna have, you had to drive to the school and pick up the application and then fill everything out. We weren't gonna do that, so I supported the policy. And I also believe sometimes you have to, like, when the policy goes in place, see like, what are the outcomes, what are some of the things you hadn't anticipated? So, and I'm just gonna like lay on the table, I totally have a conflict of interest since I am a September 5th birthday. I'm a September 5th birthday.
Oh, were you
This is
Pam
personal.
Tom?
This is.
No,
Yeah.
but it's random, like, why would I, like, my sister who's 1 year older but born in January, like, went off, to kindergarten, and like,
You
I
were
did too,
ready.
I went as a 4-year-old, 5 days shy, it's great. So I'm not gonna call this a
You
Verdone
did pretty
exception.
good.
But, it is an arbitrary date, so, and I'd love to, I sent you an email about just like understanding sort of like it's arbitrary, and so like we used to have started after Labor Day, now we start before. However, one of the things so I drafted something that had some more flex for those like September birthdays that took out any sort of, it'd almost be like you automatically apply in. And there wouldn't be any testing or reference letters or anything like that. Because I feel that in some ways, and again, this is like, sometimes you go back and look at like, oh, we drew a hard line and we said like, this makes a lot of sense. And then people are like, well, what about X? And because one of the solutions is like, they should enroll in a preschool program. So actually, there's not that much, even though there's preschool for all, there's not that much access to preschool for a lot of families. And so it's not really a solution to like, your child can go into preschool for another year. You know, they missed it by 2 days, they can go to preschool for another year. But the other thing is that the policy and apparently, there's been reports when parents have called about it, what they've been told is you can enroll your child in a private kindergarten and pay for it. And then mid-year, transfer into our kindergarten, even if their birthday is after September 1st, because they're coming. Which to me is like even more of
If you have
a,
the money,
pardon? Well, yeah, so I did look, like anywhere from $10,000 to go to All Saints Kindergarten to 30,000, let's see,
Are
Or OES.
kindergarten?
pardon?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but like, you know, All Saints, which is like a
30,000.
local parochial schools,
Yeah.
8,000, so, you know, I mean, here's in my mind, kind of just being like common sense. And I'm open to like having a lot bigger discussion about it. But if we're telling people that, people go do it, so they are in it for part of the year and then transfer in, even though their birth date was after September 1st. That's a huge inequity because most parents can't pay for it. A lot of parents can't pay for that, so we're just providing a solution that
So you
only.
mean they can just transfer in because they went,
That's what,
no, nothing from the,
Yeah.
It's like taking
I mean,
a pre-rec.
our actually policy says that. It says,
nothing from the kindergarten teacher?
No.
Nobody?
it's just they can transfer over.
They already know how to line up.
After what? After time of year,
Evaluations.
after
It does-
day, after?
It doesn't say. And then the other thing is like, okay, so we tell people to do that, and it's like, so maybe they do that, and it's like, oh, I'm not gonna disrupt things for my kid, because they've integrated into the kindergarten class, I'm just gonna stay here, and it's like, oh, and then now we lost another student out of PPS. So I'm trying to think of a way to like hold on to our principles of equity, and also recognize that September month, I say, I've been around PPS for a long time, and the majority of the time, their starting date was after Labor Day.
Was for a long time.
Yeah, well, it wasn't until the Parents Coalition got it changed to before Labor Day.
Still have that.
So there's just this period, it seems like we are fostering, and then I went and looked at some of the dates of, I talked to the superintendent about this, like dates when which other school district starts, and she referenced like LA or their cutoff line is like December. And so I wanted to just like raise the issue, like I think it's arbitrary, and I'm wondering, just for discussion, I'd love to get your team's thought, is like, if you had something printed out, the application, but it's sort of like, you just check, like, I know my child's like in that whatever grade, so you're not filling out a separate application, it's still the same kindergarten application. And that in that whatever month, or it could be 2 weeks, but it is that gray area between like Labor Day and September 15th, is having a process by which we're not creating an, here's an additional burden. I mean, we want people to send their kids to PPS. And we haven't created barriers or, everybody has to fill out the application, the enrollment application, so just that's something you can check. And, I think there's a piece to having conversations, and I say this as a parent with 3 kids who have different learning needs, that really debating like, okay, is this the right choice to send, like, even though they're, by several months met the deadline, like, should I move them ahead? Or like keep them moving or hold them back. And I think there is a moment as part of like, your child's in that age group, and this is the age group, it's arbitrary, but we think maybe they might not be ready for kindergarten, and here's some preschool options. Which is less of a hard deadline and putting parents more in the driver's seat, versus asking the enrollment office to be like judging whether a child's ready for.
Even expert.
I don't know, First of all, if you can get your kid into kindergarten and save a whole year of daycare, you're gonna do it because you can save a whole lot of money. And especially if nobody's saying whether they're ready or. It could
Except
be
for if you're
just-
born on August 31st, nobody says you're ready or not. It's just like you're ready, because
Well, and
It's
a lot
arbitrary.
of people are holding their kids back if they're born in August, so they're coming in almost 6.
that's true.
And
Yeah, a
so
lot
if you
of-
come in early, you're more than a year behind many of the kids in your class.
But you
And
literally
especially
are
when you
days
get to be
behind.
a teenager, you're in trouble.
It's hard. I think I did okay. I think
Well,
Roseanne,
I did too.
September 12th did okay.
I'm a December
Can
birthday.
I share a couple?
Up was January, so I was really young too.
I was born in January and I skipped kindergarten.
But-
Even though my parents tried to get me into kindergarten.
I'd like to.
I have a few thoughts,
I
and then
just-
Judy Brennan is virtually too. We've talked about it a little bit this since we got your suggestion. So a few different thoughts. Like it will always be an arbitrary date, right? Like there always is going to have to be a line in the sand somewhere, and it's always going to be an arbitrary date, and there's always going to be someone born the next day. So and that's just like the
Yeah.
hard situation. And I will say, since we've had this shift, Judy and I compared notes. There have literally been a handful of families who have reached out to us concerned, a handful meaning less than 5, right? Like,
Okay.
who have shared concerns and have fallen in that small window, and we've been able to talk through it and have those conversations. I guess another, I think, important factor is, while it's arbitrary, it's aligned with our state. So Oregon statute talks about starting to offer full-day free school to 5-year-olds, and it defines September 1st as the defining date when somebody is 5 for kindergarten. And so I did a quick peek around again today at all of our surrounding districts, and they almost all use September 1 because it's the Oregon State
But
arbitrary
we
date.
don't have to.
Do you know what I mean?
There's no preschool for everybody. I mean, it's just like,
I'm just telling you the
Right.
facts of like, there's a reason why it's September 1, right, versus December in LA or other places.
Yeah.
It's because our state has defined September 1 as that date, and most districts around us align with that date. I think my worry about the suggested language is it essentially just creates October 1 as the new arbitrary date, right? Because if everybody who was born in September is allowed to just check the box that they want to start, then then why not just make October 1
Mm-hmm.
our date? Like it's, the way that it's worded suggests that it's a request. But if it's a request, then there needs to be some kind of staff capacity to review that request and either approve or not approve that request. And so another factor in this is, and I think, we've come to you to talk to you about this before, we cut $2.5 million out of our early learners department last year and really streamlined the whole team so that the focus of the team would really be on high quality, equitable learning experiences for all of our pre-K students in our 51 pre-K classrooms. And then the other big chunk of work they carry is a well-supported connected kindergarten transition for in particular, for all of our families, but in particular for our priority families. So I'm real hesitant to divert any staff resources to this small slice of,
5, under
a
5.
small, yeah, and I'm sure it's more than 5 that are actually, but we could pull that data if that was interesting to people, like how many kids in first grade had birthdays in September, and we could
yeah,
go
we
through
know
that
it's
exercise,
more than
but
5.
it's more than 5. I'm just saying in terms of how many people have come forward very upset about this or wanting to work through it. It's been a small number in the last 2 years.
When you say work through it, how did you work through it besides telling them you can enroll in a private school and transfer in?
When it's come to my team, and Judy can talk about, different things come to enrollment versus come to early learners, we say, this is the rule for enrollment in kindergarten. We're happy to talk you through available pre-K opportunities.
But
And
for a
that
lot of
we-
people, there's, you can't enroll in PBS's pre-K programs
Why not?
because of income eligibility and other.
I mean, our seats are increasingly flexible because of preschool for all.
I'm sorry.
Our seats are increasingly flexible because of preschool for all. So all of our pre-K applications state, regardless of income, you should try applying, because if we have preschool for all seats available post the end, beginning of the school year, and we filled all our priority seats, we do have available space for people at fixed incomes.
But if if they don't been filled and there's not any on the west side or, I mean,
Yeah, and that's just PPS pre-K, right? Like there's preschool for all around the county now and it's expanding every year. So there is more and more free public pre-K. There's not enough for everybody yet,
yeah.
like.
I mean,
by all
I
means,
know how
right?
much
Like,
PK this is, like, for example, there's like no preschool club down the west side. Very little.
I got you.
If you look at, so I don't think that's
Yeah.
necessarily an option, but I'd love for you,
Yeah.
like, to send us the data of like what is open, and it's also what's open then, because for people to wait, like, hey, if there's slots open after school starts, like, most people aren't gonna wait.
And some families don't want pre-K, again, because they've already been in pre-K and they want kindergarten. And to your point, and I think the
Yeah.
point you made, Director Sullivan, about, and that's something Judy and I talked about too, there are more and more families who are holding kids back, and therefore you have 6-year-olds early in kindergarten, and then if you've got 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds in September in a kindergarten classroom, that's a pretty wide range, and we are hearing a lot from our kindergarten teachers already about the challenges of incoming kindergartners and the range of needs, and so these are all just factors. I don't know, we can figure out where we land, but these are all factors.
I mean, I
think
guess-
Judy might have.
I'm just gonna, one thing to say about that though, is like saying that because people held their kids back and they're 6, we had that whole debate in our family, decided not to, and so I'm really glad I didn't, because my son physically matured very early, and so it was like, he would have been a man in 5th grade. And physically was. And so like there's whole other ramifications of, because other parents made that choice, they've created the broader range, which seems like the wrong thing to say, because other parents made a decision to have their kids be older, that that's gonna impact the band.
Yeah, I think all of those
Yeah, we don't
factors
say
to
anything-
consider, like, it's a tricky, there's no right answer to this question, I guess I'm gonna say, and
Yeah.
it's always gonna be arbitrary, and there's always gonna be some people who are born right after. And
Yeah.
that will always be true, and so we just have to, I think about equity implications on the balance needs in kindergarten and like staffing resource. Right,
Yeah.
are the things that I think about, and also just clear communications to our community, and those are all the factors I think about. I don't know that there's a hard right answer. I do be curious what Judy has to add. She has her hand up. But
Judy, go ahead.
One
Wait,
is
Judy, we
that,
can't hear you yet.
can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
We can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
No, we can't hear you.
Hi, no?
Nothing?
Yes,
There you go.
Yeah, now.
Okay,
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll try to be quick. So a couple of things. One, I want to reinforce that when we did have an early entry process, and the cutoff for early entry was September 30th, every year we heard from parents of October birthdays saying, I know my child would be, I know my child will qualify. I can get you all this. How can you shut us out? So it was, when the line was October 1, we still had families on the other side of that line who wanted to be considered. And that will be the case no matter what we do. I also wanted to just be clear about what the options are. Like, we don't require people to go to a private kindergarten. There are other public options, including charter options, where a student might be able to enroll. We don't make the policies for those charter schools. There are homeschool and other options. So I just want to be clear about that. We don't invite people to attend a private school. We do say, if your child is enrolled in kindergarten, once they are enrolled in an accredited kindergarten and you have evidence that they've been enrolled in kindergarten, then they can also transfer into Portland Public Schools kindergarten during the same year. And this rule is partly because other states do have different deadlines. And in the past, we had confusion. A child would arrive with a birthday past September 1st. They would be in kindergarten. The school would question, are we supposed to enroll them in kindergarten or not? So the rule that's in policy now, the statement is to clarify that once you start a grade level, you have the right to continue in it. You're right, we don't say exactly what you have to do to prove that you've been successfully enrolled in that prior grade, but usually a child brings records from that grade. And so that's how that particular statement came to be. I just wanted to add that clarification so you can understand how we have processed this since the policy changed 2 years ago. We have not pulled data yet. I mean, we really only have, with 2 kindergarten classes who have gone through this so far. But we have not pulled any data to see if there's a difference, for example, in the number of young students who are in first grade this year, or who will be in first grade. We don't know who's going to be in first grade next year. So we have very little data to work on, but we could certainly pull information and give it back to you if that would be helpful.
That would be great. And just to clarify, Judy, you said they could enroll in a charter, a public charter, which you don't have to pay for. So I guess that's equitable, if you can get in.
If you can get in though,
If you
there are
can
not
get
as
in,
many spots.
And then you said homeschooled. Are you saying if like somebody did a homeschool kindergarten program and then came to the PPS and said, my child's been in homeschool, is that what you meant?
If they had evidence of being in an accredited institution, and that includes homeschooled institutions, they would be allowed to continue in the same grade. So you can't just say it, you do have to show records that go with it.
Okay, and then, how much did our kindergarten enrollment drop the last 3 years?
Kindergarten enrollment has dropped significantly. And and the staff report from 2 years ago indicated that the average number, Emily, sorry, I just pulled over, I was driving.
No.
Emily probably has the number, but I think it was approximately 35 students per year that participated in the early entry process.
That qualified. I think there were more than that applied, that had to be, that
Okay.
in all the discussions and all the testing and all the stuff, that there were about 30 that qualified each year on average.
I mean, I can definitely confirm that the kindergarten enrollment has been far greater, the loss has been greater than that number of students over the past 2 years.
And you'd also have to follow up and see if they seem to qualify coming in, are they still at third grade level?
Yeah.
Because, you don't want to push them.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, as you know, I was a principal in PPS for 6 years and had several of these situations. And I mean, I would say there were like a few that worked out. There were a few that like by the middle of the year, it was clear that like while there might have been some academic readiness, which is really about opportunity, it's not about, like, it's really about was there exposure, was there preschool, was there reading at home, like right at that age. There often were like emotional or social challenges, which makes sense because there's a lot of development that happens at that time and the vast need is wide range. Kindergarten teachers, I would say, largely were not in favor of early entry to kindergarten as a policy, and I think I'm hearing that from your director Sullivan as a future, like this idea of.
So they were saying like a student whose birthday was September 10th had significantly more issues than August 15th.
The same thing about August birthdays. I mean, I think in general, anyone who's real close to that deadline makes, there's a lot of emotional maturity and development happens in very few months at that age, right? Like, and again, there's a wide range. Like there's no real typical, but even late summer birthdays, like often kids are younger emotionally, right? And so somewhere we have to draw the line where we say this is going to be the entry point for us.
So I'm wondering.
I really appreciate the focus on early learning because of the brain development that happens 0 to 5. And your background in it is really helpful in yours too, Director Sullivan. Because we're not saying like what's best for the child. And 2 years in a classroom between 4 and 6 sounds like 10 years. in adult years, just in terms of where all the kids are, like you said, emotional and even physical development. I mean,
It
one of the
really should be
things I
4 and
learned, for
5.
instance,
And-
is that a child needs to be able to hop on one foot to be ready. I've heard this from someone that is a Montessori educator in my family. They train Montessori teachers to hop on one foot.
Yeah, and kids are all different,
And-
right? Like,
and-
I'm sure
and
there
there's
are
other-
kids born September 2nd who would excel in kindergarten and beyond, right? Like,
Yes.
of course, like, there's no.
So, but there's a fine motor skill, there's a
Yes,
large motor
there's all the
skill,
arts.
there's a brain development, a continuum.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested in, and we have to have, there has to be a date
Right.
at some time, could be any, you could pick a date.
Right.
And to Judy's point, they would be, if it's May 23rd, people born in the last week of May are gonna think that their child is brilliant and is able to do it, and it might not be the case because of that age. I'd like to, whatever's good for the kids.
And again, this is gonna be just by what you say, it's gonna be imperfect, right? There are gonna be
It's gonna be
kids on both
imperfect.
sides of the line who a teacher may not consider ready for kindergarten. In fact, in PPS, we really tried to move away from the framing of ready for kindergarten and move to kindergarten needs to be ready for kids, whoever's coming in the door. But we do need to have some rules that are clear around enrollment and policies, and there needs to be
Do you have a point of view about parents who hold their kids back? I mean,
Some parents like to
I-
hold their kids
well, I'm-
back
I'm-
they're more
because they like
physically-
to hold their kids back. I mean,
Well, no,
I
I
tell
boys.
everybody again, kindergarten should be ready for your kids. There's no hard set of skills your kids need to have to be ready, but but it's a family's choice, right? Like, if a family decides for whatever reason that's the right decision for their child, they.
So I have friends that live in
Yes.
Canada and they want it, there's a culture of holding their boys back. So they're bigger when they get into that hockey team.
well, there's a whole book of
They're-
outliers about that
Yeah,
shows.
so that's not a thing we endorse or encourage with DPS. It is a decision some families make, and they can't.
So,
You know,
so one thing I would like from you, because I think for us saying they can go to preschool, if it's not real, we shouldn't say that. So, for example, when we should say that is during our open, what's open actually during the kindergarten, when people are running for kindergarten. Because if you're a parent, like PPS is saying, no, you can't do that. It can't be, well, you have to wait till August to find out whether you're going to get in their preschool, because they could make other choices.
So that last one out today.
So I got it. But I'd like to know how
Yeah.
many slots we have open
Yeah.
and who are they restricted to?
Yeah.
And who they're open to.
Yeah.
Because again, when I read the materials that say, you can go to preschool, and I don't think that's real, because I talk to a lot of parents, I mean, it exists. Spaces exist, it's still very limited. So I'd like to see the data on that. And then,
Do you mean just in PPS or in
Well, just in
our
PPS,
boundaries,
because-
or?
I'm thinking about what message are we sending to our PPS parents? Our future PPS parents.
So pre-K offered anywhere in Portland boundaries, is that what you're?
Right,
anywhere in our
because
community?
if
So
they're,
that's a
if
broad
we're saying,
question, but yeah, okay.
your birthday's September 7th, and in the staff memos, they go to pre-K, it's I'd like to see what pre-K they actually go to in PPS, in PPS.
I think that's my question. Do you mean offered by PPS or do you mean
Well, that's
in
what
our,
that's
in
what
our geographic region?
That's what I assume, because otherwise, I mean,
You're just gonna, whatever date you set, they're not gonna.
I know,
It
but
doesn't
we shouldn't
make sense.
we shouldn't be saying, you can go to, there's a preschool option for you, because that is what the staff report said, they can go to a preschool, and it's and
Yeah,
I don't think we should represent, this is more about how we message it, because if,
Okay.
it's not real, we shouldn't say we let them go to preschool, or we set up them up for your preschool, and when in fact they can't get into preschool. And the thing, the next meeting, I'd love to get your point of view, or at some point in time, why we allow kids from other states, again, we're in a declining, why we allow, if the rationale, as Judy said, that students from other states can do that. Even though they can enter our kindergartens if they didn't start there because they started somewhere else, why we think that's okay, because if we're gonna be hard nosed about it, we'd say, they've got to wait another year. I mean, I'm just,
I thought we were losing families.
well, I'm just saying, it seems inconsistent for us to say, hey, if you move here from another state, it doesn't matter what date your child was. Like,
If
I
they've
don't-
already been.
I think Judy said that was and Judy, correct me if I'm wrong,
If they've
that
already
was
been
the
in
rationale
kindergarten.
for the language, but it's applicable to anybody. You don't have to be coming from
Okay.
out of state to
Whatever.
access this language. I think is what Judy.
but how, I'm just like curious, like how that is, like, it makes sense. Like, how is that consistent? If we're saying,
And you mean this, I just wanna make sure I'm getting correctly, so you mean this like, 1C2? Is that what you're talking about? You're talking about this clause about someone who's been enrolled in kindergarten outside of PPS, and they may enter the school district during the school year, that's the clause.
even if their
One
birthday
word.
occurs after September 1st?
Yeah, that's
It
the
just
clause.
doesn't seem
An explanation
consistent.
around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because different districts have different codes.
Right,
Although
but
my
if,
sister,
but if we're gonna be arbitrary with our future families, I mean, I'm just like, and then my other question is the one you've given somewhat of a rationale for like why September 1st, but like, is it, if we all agree there's gonna be like an arbitrary date, does it matter to you which one it is?
Well, it has to align with the state. I thought the state was September
The-
1st.
The state doesn't,
I was shake my head because it's an alignment, but it's not a requirement.
it's not a requirement.
Okay. But every other district in the state,
I pulled we could pull more if you want. I mean, I pulled just sort of our surrounding
Surrounding.
districts, and they were all September 1, except I think Hillsborough was September 10, I believe.
And Lake Oswego has the September 15th exception.
Okay, so we can pull more
That you can
comparable
apply for.
district data, if that's helpful.
The thing is, everyone's gonna wanna go early.
That's not true.
So, I mean, well,
Well,
not
everyone's not
everyone,
going
but
to
as
want to go
many
early
people-
because
yeah, a lot
we
of
just talked about the hundreds of people who sent their
No,
kids
there are
late.
hundreds, there's some, but anybody who has to find daycare for their kids
Yeah.
is
But the-
going to want them to go to kindergarten early.
But Patty, we
And
just
it's
talked about the
gonna
whole
change.
group of parents who hold their kids back
Well,
the
yeah,
whole
there
other year.
are some,
there's some.
and this is
But-
gonna
but
make
you're
more
saying-
and more.
But you're saying all parents are gonna do that, and we know,
Uh,
like, lots of parents don't
I
because
think
they're
most parents who have to pay for daycare or pay for childcare while they're there.
Both these things are true,
I'm-
both these things will happen.
Yeah.
These are both real things,
But
right?
you're gonna get a wider and wider and wider range.
But I think you should be careful about using the word always, because you're implying that people are gonna, I mean, I don't think you should use the word always, because that's implying that parents are doing something that maybe not be good for their kid because they don't wanna pay childcare, and that's just like, that's an assumption you're making.
That's what I think.
But
quite
that's
a few
many,
people-
many people though. That's the middle
Okay,
class.
and
It's
we know
working
that a lot of
people.
people hold their kids back and pay whatever it is, or stay home.
That would be a smaller
No.
universe of families.
It's
I
actually,
believe.
sounds like it's a larger universe.
I don't have those numbers, and I don't want to
Okay.
be misrepresenting it. I think if that's data
I
people
think
want,
that's
we
just
could
a
try
few.
to pull that data.
Well, the
We
staff
looked at the
report
income
had some.
triangle in Portland and we
I don't
can
think we have that
we can
data in our
infer.
staff report. We can pull, but you're interested in students who are starting kindergarten as 6-year-olds? Is that a question you have?
I think, and maybe it's just, we had data in the staff report about the number.
So I'm hearing
of kids
interested in
people.
number of students.
And again, we shouldn't use that as an excuse of like, well, we've got 6-year-olds in the class because parents made decisions to put their kids back.
No, but I'm hearing I think a want for precise numbers when we're talking about large groups or some groups or all or whatever. So I'm hearing number of students starting kindergarten as 6-year-olds. We can also, Judy suggested looking at number of first graders who had those September birthdays,
Yeah.
right? Like who managed this kindergarten situation one way or another and started first grade in VPS the next year to answer that question of is this policy making us lose students in some way, right? Like we can look at that. So we can, Judy and I can work on some data and pull some things together, and then sounds like rationale for the transfer policy mid-year, information on how much kindergarten enrollment has dropped over the last 3 years, and then rationale on why September 1, with a different arbitrary date, matter.
And I get the whole argument, like you pick a date, it's
Yeah.
arbitrary. I do think, like I say, our starting date has shifted over the years. Sometimes it's before Labor Day, sometimes it's after. And I just think it's,
Yeah, I mean, but our argument is earlier now, right?
Pardon?
That would put our date in August somewhere, which I don't think we wanna
Right,
do
well, it
that,
depends
right?
on when Labor Day
Yeah, yeah.
falls.
And then the last thing I heard was, just information about how much pre-K really is available in the Portland area.
Sorry, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Judy.
Thanks, Judy.
Okay. We don't have a lot of time. I'm gonna set this up for next meeting. And what I would ask, thank you so much, Emily, for coming, is that between now and the next meeting, think about what questions you have. So this is setting up,
Yes. The
A-
solicitation policy.
pardon?
Solicitation.
Yeah, and it's,
It's been in the news.
it has, today, as a matter of
Yeah,
fact.
but yes.
And there's not a lot of difference, I think, between the county and the city, or the county, the city,
Yeah.
we're a large jurisdiction of,
Mhm.
that, lets out a lot of contracts.
And yes, this is, just
So
really happy to read this.
unlike, say, other entities like the city of Portland, where they will put something in ordinance, our practice is we set out the high level principles and policy and then have an AD or something else,
Some other
the details.
detailed direction.
So this is really designed, because if somebody looked at this is like so high level and vague, it's like, well, it's actually to basically provide direction to staff to create a framework. So, right. Do you want me to walk that through?
It's your fault, so
Okay.
you're looking at me,
Okay.
I'm trying
Well,
to put
just-
words around your concept, but it's, so I think you should.
So essentially, the first paragraph just sets out, like, why we do it. It's like, we're a large public entity, and we let a lot of contracts and expenditures. The second, paragraph is that acknowledging that, like, there's a whole other section on conflicts of interest that applies to board members, that applies to district staff. And then it defines what contracts and expenditures would be covered by this, and makes two very important exceptions. As you both know, a lot of our contracts are all done by RFP, and so there's a competitive scoring process. There's there's no conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't apply to anything related to that, and obviously not apply to our collective bargaining agreement. So if PAT is in advocating on behalf of their contract, that's not lobbying.
Right,
And then it defines, and this is a place where the question is some thresholds. This is 100,000. I'll say in most registrations, the threshold is like the first dollar. So for example, like
The city of Portland,
right, it's like if you're gonna be
if
advocating.
you're lobbying,
Right.
you need to register with the city and you need to disclose.
Right, so it's not like, oh, this is just like a $10,000 deal.
Yeah, just where you're having drinks or whatever, yeah.
So that's one thing. There was a higher number in. I think we should go look at what the best practice is, because I think the best practice is like if you're advocating on behalf of it, it's whatever level.
Could it be a percentage of the contract? I wonder if our internal auditor might have some ideas about.
I say most, and there's jurisdictions across the whole US. There's lots of models, but most that I'm aware of, separate threshold is like if you're in advocating and you need to, like, you're being paid, not this isn't volunteers, but if you're being paid to come in and
Sell a product?
sell yonder pouches or, pick the item, like, you would need to, it's a transparency. It's not, you can't do it. It's just like, we're gonna be
You
transparent.
need to disclose.
Can you tell me something where that happens?
Where what happens?
Where
I
somebody
know.
has come in
Yeah.
and we bought something for.
Well, weren't you lobbied by the yonder pouch person the whole time?
I'm in an email, but I just.
Frankie or whatever, Frenchie?
Frenchie.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so
I'll just say,
that's what you're
Go
talking
to
about.
the
That's
Council of
fine.
Great City Schools or to COSA, like all the vendors. They're all
All,
so,
so the curriculum,
Or the people who are trying to sell you a new curriculum.
well,
or
or
something
or
like
or the playground
iPads,
equipment, or, I mean,
iPads for 7-year-olds,
Okay, so
curriculum,
anything like that.
apps, yeah.
apps, the Yonder Pouches was a really good one.
So that's,
So if Yonder wanted to come do business with the district, they would have to say, I'm doing business to public, I'm doing business with the district. I want to sell 7 high schools Yonder Pouches, 30,000 apiece. And I have lunch with the superintendent to tell them how great or whatever's being sold or advocated would have to be
And it's
disclosed.
communicated for more than 5 hours.
so that's the other piece. So this is, for example, I think the city has 8 hours, Metro has 5 per quarter. So there's sort of like
Yeah,
there's a threshold of like, hey, if you make one phone call, like,
yeah,
that would be the case, but if you like, somebody out to lunch, and then you're going
Yeah.
meeting individually with every board member,
Mhm.
or like all the members of whatever the curriculum team. But that's a place, and then there's a question about, there's registration, again, that's about transparency, again, not, it's just part of business, I mean, that's what salespeople are for, you know, they, or advocates, then the question would be also about reporting, and there are ways in which it can be onerous, less onerous, and that might be a matter of like staff time. So I think we should be thinking about that reporting piece. The registration, it's pretty straightforward. Like, for example, just use Metro. You just go onto their website, there's like, you know, waste management is like just listed with their, like, we meet the lobbying requirements and we lobby Metro.
okay, so,
The reporting is somewhat different, and the question of like how much reporting you want to have. The state currently requires quarterly and annual reporting on like who from your entity is the site lobbyist, there's an entity registration, and then if you've expended any funds, you have to report it.
the process of like making that transparent, that reporting piece could be made very easy by embedding a Google form. You know, for instance,
I think that's how Metro does it.
if I'm registering as a lobbyist, I can fill out my name and organization I'm representing and maybe some other data, but that can go directly to, that could be, go right to a form on the website.
Right.
Something, or dashboard, I guess.
I just have a question to ponder on to answer some of this, so didn't even want to. The definition of engaging with, I think we'll need some clarity on those who have current contracts that require them to engage with the district. Who will seek renewal of a contract later, is doing the work with the district, engaging in hopes that it gets renewed. Like, I don't know that that's what that means, but I will
Yeah.
have to think about that.
That makes me wonder is this, so the curriculum and the Yonder, some of those examples those are things that are for sale. What about, I'm thinking about like our nonprofit partners
I mean, if they're,
coming in saying you can't cut my contract by half, even though you're facing a budget deficit.
I mean, I think if somebody shows up at board meeting and says that,
I'm
that's.
talking about outside of a board meeting, maybe with the superintendent.
I mean, well, generally the rules are written, that anybody who has an economic, who's being paid to essentially get a contract or,
Nonprofits,
I mean, they're getting paid.
they're getting paid, they're just, yeah, from,
We were really clear that does not apply to individuals or entities who are advocating for, things where there's no direct financial interest, like think of all our parents. Some of them who it's a full-time job to advocate for us or on our behalf, but they're not getting paid and they're not actually asking for something.
Okay, so what are we trying to keep from happening? Are people buying things under the table somewhere, or what's?
So,
what's the problem?
all across the United States, like in almost every large jurisdiction, where you have large sums of money, like people are paid to get contracts or allocations from public entities. So this is a general practice. And the school district is no different just because we have a noble mission of having transparency about who's seeking to influence. Again, we've
So
taken,
anybody who wants to sell us anything over $100,000.
well, but I'm gonna come up with it, I'm gonna answer your question is like, oh, I think it'd be zero. We're wanting some, again, think about those textbooks of adoption, they're millions of dollars.
Yeah, but they're all big RFPs, right? I mean, they would.
I don't think textbooks are RFPs, they're like selected by, sure.
Okay, so they're paid.
So Patty, it doesn't say you can't do it, but it is, it's a very standard practice in a large public.
But we've never had it.
We've never had it, and I would say partly because, so there was a wave in the 70s and 80s when, like, there was no disclosure and there were no rules. And a lot of it's not here, but I'm just saying, in general. And so, the approach is, we should just make it transparent. You're not outlawing it, you're just making it transparent. Of like,
Of anybody who wants to sell us.
right.
Over $100,000.
I mean, it's interesting because right now, mostly the contractors, they file public records requests to ask for like what the bid things, they're, they're competitors. But it puts out in the open.
It daylights
It
the
daylights.
activities that happen before contract is entered.
And I don't think there's anything special about PPS, like,
No,
we wouldn't do it because we're a school district.
yeah, we're trying to maintain, some
Yeah.
secrecy around, no, I think this is good,
Um,
a good protection to have in place.
And then the last paragraph is just like reminding people, like, hey, that these rules that even if you say filled a Google sheet and you're reporting, you still have to, like, you're limited to $50 annually if you're gonna take somebody out to lunch, like, that there's other rules that apply that even though you're
Well,
registered.
there's our ethics rules. Already.
Right, well, then there's that in place, but also,
But not for the lobbyists necessarily, are there?
yes,
There are?
you can't spend more than $50.
As a
person.
lobbyist?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Oh, I didn't know that.
For sure.
Okay, for sure, okay.
Yeah, so the rules apply both ways, and
Oh, I
frankly,
didn't realize
usually
that.
it's the public officials who don't know what the rules are. Most people who are registered lobbyists very much know what the
Mhm.
rules are about, like, what's allowed.
Mhm.
So the last term is just like, hey, you may be reporting that you're and registering as a lobbyist, but you also are still required to follow all the other ethics rules that are in play. Officials.
So now tell me an example
Of what?
of somebody who's wanting to make a contract with one of us.
Okay, Yonder, all the textbooks, any of the apps.
Should I pull up my inbox?
Okay, so I'll get an email about that. And let's just say, oh, I'm kind of interested. Then do they have to register right away?
Well, if
Before
they
they-
have a 5-hour conversation with you in a quarter, or they have an hour conversation with you and then Michelle and then, me and Herman, or then they like call up the chief of staff or the superintendent.
So we should say to them, if you're going to talk to us, or to all of us, or to me for 5 hours, you need to register here.
I will tell you, Patty, frankly, any person who is working with a public entity knows what the rules are, and
Mhm.
and frankly, they know that we have no rules.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But
I bet they do.
but if we didn't have the rule, that's what you would say.
Right, and I'll tell you, people, very quickly, people who are regular vendors would understand that and just sign up. Like I say, Metro, I was talking to the Metro president the other day, she said Metro put theirs in place after there was an audit that was like, you need to have this in place so that it's transparent.
Oh, wow.
And it's,
We should probably read that audit.
So they would, if they said they didn't know, because it's a new policy, so they come to us and I can say, oh, yes, I'm interested, but you need to do
Yeah.
this.
well, and they may be like, you're the first person I call and I don't think I'm gonna get to 5 hours.
Okay.
The vast majority of people who are engaged in this want to be in compliance. Because it's bad when you're not in compliance. I mean, the city of Portland has had a lot of
Yes, sir.
audits
It's
and
been on the
other
news.
disclosure about people who weren't in compliance. But the vast majority of people, you know,
Yeah.
like, it's not a big deal. They're like, they don't have, I don't mind being, vending. It's like, I have a relationship with the school district and part of their rules are you have to
You just do it.
sign, yeah.
I think it's good business practice to have these rules in place.
Just,
I mean,
As
we're
long
not
as-
a business,
As
but
long
we
as
are
we
a
know,
public entity.
we know the rules too.
Yeah.
That we-
Don't accept any $50 cups of coffee.
once a year.
Or once a year, yeah. I think it's
That's it.
$49.99.
Okay, so,
And you can go.
close the meeting because of the time, and then also just have you all think about what questions you have about this. One question I have is like how this plays out at a school level, because they're like, hey, sign up for X.
Yeah, we know I'm at one.
So I'm not quite sure what to do about schools. So maybe you can help us on that too. In addition to, I think you raised a really great issue, so I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to play out all the scenarios, so, yeah, let's think about it.
I mean, most of the time what people do is like if they have an existing contract and they want to get it to renew, they just register because like,
Yes, but you want to be clear that that's what you would engage your needs. And so
Right.
I think we want to not set traps and,
Well, if someone registers them, do they think they're definitely getting a contract?
no, I think it just means like I'm meeting the rules, which is I'm out there advocating for something that I have a financial interest in that I'm getting paid for, but I file it. I mean, generally I find like when somebody has an existing contract and they're gonna go for renewal, you get really great service. But we don't wanna have traps.
let's think about some examples and how, I mean, sophisticated people in the process would register out of abundance of caution because they don't know what the age means. But it's the people who are not going to think about that from a compliance risk manager who wouldn't ever occur to them that that's what engage means. So I think
Okay.
we want to be intentional about what engage means. And we'll think about schools, come up with other questions.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about, I don't know who decides, but like the class rooms and all those things that are super expensive that they sell to kids, it's like, how do they get into schools or, just.
Yeah, the Johnston's people.
Those may not be contracts with the district.
Probably a separate.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I know there's things that get sold and there's a flow through at school-based things and obviously we don't want to create that.
Yeah, let us think about that, and Mary has just mentioned, we should invite Emily Bortnish to the next discussion.
Oh, you were already on it?
She'll have some other perspectives and questions and think about implementation.
Great.
Emily Courtney, I was thinking Emily Glasgow.
But
Yeah,
Emily Bortnish to the purchasing and
You
contract.
might have an opinion about this too.
She had 3 kids, she might think about kindergarten, so I don't know if they have September birthdays.
Emily Courtney?
I made sure to have my kids before September.
Yeah. I mean, I had all spring birthdays, so it wasn't really about, I mean, my May 30th is. And I'm
Done deal.
I still debate, like, should I, the meeting's concluded. So, are we turned off, Terry?
Are we
Adjourned.
adjourned?
Adjourned.
Okay.
Okay. As before disclosed.